profit, it's a word for, we might use the word profit. Those of you, maybe you do accounting, or maybe you just have to keep track of the budget for your own family. The word gain in verse 7 is the word for a monetary profit. And so he said, I had all kinds of things that were profitable for me. They were, we might say they were assets. They were valuable things to me. In fact, he lists many of them in verses 4 through 6. He talks about how confident he could be because he had all of these characteristics and all of these qualities that really made him, in the eyes of Israel, a better Jew than most any other Jew that there was. And one of the things Paul had to come to grips with is he says, the things that were gained to me, all the things I thought were these advantages, just these assets that I had to bring to the table, he said, if I was going to pursue a relationship with Jesus and deepen it so that it wasn't surface level, he said, I had to take all of my assets that I thought I could bring to the table, and he says, I had to count them as loss. What does that mean? All right, so I've never used one of these, but some of you maybe have. Has anyone here in this room, you ever used the, one of those, it's like a paper, and it's got the line down the middle, and it's got a credit column on one side and a debit column on the other? How many of you all have ever used that in accounting before, okay? Some of you have. Let's make it maybe a little bit more broad. How many of you have ever used a checkbook? Anyone ever used a checkbook? Yeah, me too. Okay, that has credit and debit columns in it as well. The word gain here is the word for, you might say, credit. And the word loss here is the word for debit. So here's what he's saying he's doing, is Paul says all the things that if you were to look at his life, because a Pharisee, Pharisees had so many advantages. I mean, he was a man, probably a man of wealth. He was probably a man of status. He probably had a very, probably a powerful family position. He was probably also very prolific in his Bible knowledge. In fact, sometimes these Pharisees had literally books of the Bible memorized. He had all kinds of skills. I mean, he trained under Gamaliel, which was like going to the best college that he could at that time. And here's what Paul said. He said, I had to take everything that I thought was an advantage and an asset that I thought was going to propel me even through my Christian life, and he said, I had to take them all out of the credit column and put them all in the debit column, and I had to be willing to lose any of it if that's what it took to draw closer to Jesus. So I want you to think about this. Have you ever considered that maybe some of the biggest things you thought were assets or advantages in your life, you ever thought that actually those might be the very liabilities that'll keep you from knowing Jesus better? How so? Well, some of you in this room might be very skilled at management, business management. Good for you. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having a job in business management. And you might say, well, that's just, God's given me this incredible skill. I bet he has. I believe it. You ever thought that actually that might be the liability that'll keep you from knowing Jesus better? Because one day, if they haven't already, someone's going to come to you and say, I can make you a lot of money with that skill, but it's going to cost you like all your Sundays. You're not going to be in God's house anymore. What are you going to do? Well, God's given me a talent. Okay. Paul had talents too, and you know what he did? He said, if necessary, I'll take all my talents, skills, and assets that I thought were gains, I'll put them in the loss column. I'm okay with them disappearing from my life if it means I come to know the Lord well. You know, we are in a place where, good night, there's all kinds of musical ability all over the place. You know, it very much happens out in the world, but especially, sometimes we look at musical skill and say, boy, that is the asset. You've got such an asset that can be used for God. And yes, it absolutely can. And I'm not saying don't pursue it as being used for God. But just know this, you know that perhaps for some of you, your ability to do music might be the very thing that'll keep you from knowing God better. Because if you pursue that over pursuing your relationship with Jesus, you got a problem. Maybe you have some ability at sports. Maybe you have some ability at acting. I don't know. Maybe you have some kind of ability at speaking, or maybe you have some kind of extensive education. Maybe you're kind of a public speaker. All these are good things. But what Paul said was, if those things are distracting me from knowing Jesus better, he said, I'm willing to get rid of them all. I don't mind if they disappear from my life if it means I come to know Jesus better. It's the idea of this. It's the idea of coming to realize some things that I used to think were good for me actually are not. You know, that happens, that's going to happen in just regular life. Why don't we apply it to our spiritual lives? For example, don't we ever, when it comes to food, especially in the last few years, I think a lot of Americans are much more conscious about what's in their food, right? I'll tell you, I remember, whatever it was, a year ago, when RFK Jr., he makes a lot of videos. And I remember, he made a video, and he had a table out in front of him. And on that table, he had things like, beautiful things, like Cheez-Its and Captain Crunch, things that I love. He had all these foods laid out on there, and they were all things that it was like, well, especially, okay, sure, yeah, Captain Crunch probably not the best for you, but cheese, that's just a cracker, right? That's just a cracker. Crackers are good for you. Crackers is a great thing, great solid food. Of course, then here comes RFK Jr., and he say, well, actually, what we have here is the Captain Crunch. You don't want it, and so he's trying to tell us about all these different things and about all the the toxins that are in it, and what he's trying to tell us is these things maybe you used to think they were good for you. What's he saying? They're actually not. These things you thought were good, they're actually not. And what God is saying is the same thing. He's saying the things you thought were actually assets for your life, you better watch out. That might be the very thing that distracts you from knowing Jesus better. Let me give you a real-life example. When I was a dorm counselor in Bible college, during my years of grad school, my job that I had as a GA was I was a dormitory counselor. And so sometimes people were sent to me, okay? They were sent to me, and they had gotten in trouble, and so they had to do mandatory counseling, which I did. But really, I enjoyed the ones who would come to me on their own and say, Matt, I got a problem, I got an issue, I want some help. That was always fun. But one of my jobs as a dormitory counselor was I was supposed to meet with all the freshmen that had shown up. I needed to have just a 10-15 minute meeting with all of them within the first few weeks of college. And the reason was simply that to just let them know that I exist. And the idea was, listen, I'm here, literally, I am paid to be here as a biblical counselor. If anything should come up, know this. This is my room. I'm here to help you. Okay, so I would have these meetings with the freshmen. And there was this one freshman, and we'd just try to get to know each other and just spend a little bit of time talking, and then tell them that I'm here for you, and come on, let me know if I can be a blessing to you. It was almost like having a pastoral role over about 125 guys. And I had this one freshman that came, and we were having our meeting, and it's real easy for me if the freshman enjoys football. Okay, then that's a really easy freshman meeting, and he loved football. He had played it. Watch this. He began to tell me a little bit of his testimony, and he had one of those testimonies you might have heard before, where he was really in high school. He was really good at football. In fact, he was good enough that he was being recruited to play football, to play offensive guard at Ohio State University. Now, for some of you, I don't know, there might be one or two Alabama fans here. You might be like, well, yeah, I get it. All right, that's fine. Yeah, I don't like Ohio State either, but let's just recognize this. Ohio State, and some of you are sitting here being like, is that a big deal? Does anybody care? Yes, actually, if you play football at Ohio State University, you know what that means? NFL scouts are going to watch you, and you have a chance to, if you play for Ohio State, you have a much better chance to get into the draft and therefore become a millionaire as an NFL player. So that's a big deal. And so, he was being scouted, recruited, and he said, senior year, he talked about how it became an idol to him, that football was an idol, and so he talked about how, God, though, on his senior year, he got a major injury to his leg, that therefore he couldn't play his senior year, and he was mad about it, and God used that situation to show him that he had made football an idol, and so he had to get that right with God and surrender it to God. Cool testimony. Listen to this. So I told him, I said, that's an awesome testimony. I said, I know it's not anything on the level of what you're used to. But I said, even here at school, when I was an undergrad, I played with some of the flag football leagues. I know it's not on your level, but maybe it'd just be fun. I didn't know if you knew that we have some small, some short season, flag football. And if you want to participate in it, maybe that'd be something that'd be fun to you. Watch this. He said, no. He said, I can't do it. I can't touch it. He said, if I touch it, I'll want to go back to it. that guy really had just about every right to play football again, right? Just because, as long as he didn't make it an idol. He could play some football, but you know what he realized? Some things that everybody thinks are good for me, everybody who looks at him would say, what an asset you have, that you have so much sports skill. And he realized something. That asset that he had was actually a liability that was keeping him from knowing Jesus better. And so you know what he said? It's going to go. It's not allowed in my life. Hey, nothing sinful about football. Nothing sinful about enjoying a sport, watching a sport, playing a sport. But he said, I can't touch it, he said, because it'll keep me from knowing Jesus better. And so in verse number 8, Paul heightens this thing. In verse 7, he's definitely referring to the things in previous verses about his Jewish advantages. But in verse 8, he heightens it and says, yea, doubtless, I count all things but loss. In other words, he says, I am willing to lose anything that distracts me from knowing Jesus better. Friend, anything that distracts you from your relationship with Jesus must be considered a loss and needs to go. Friend, if it distracts you from knowing Jesus better, it needs to go. But it's not sinful. It's probably not. If it distracts you from knowing Jesus better, it needs to go. If he's actually number one, then it needs to go. When you think about getting to know Jesus better, I think about church attendance, being underneath the preaching of God's word. I think about personal devotions, reading your Bible each day. I think about having your own personal prayer time. These ways, maybe a meditation where you just sit and meditate on the word of God. These great ways that you can deepen and develop your relationship with Jesus Christ. What things rival it? Sports like this guy? Now I know, look, I'm talking to adults. I know that. So, for some of you, your football careers have since turned. And you're not really following football careers. But I'll tell you what, it's on TV, isn't it? Nothing sinful about watching a football game, but I'm going to tell you what, if watching a football game is what keeps you from developing and deepening your walk with Jesus, you have no right to be watching football. What about adults? Games on your phone. You know something? It's very easy for us to have sometimes hours in a week to be on games or social media on our phones, adults. And then we wonder, why don't I have time for prayer? Well, you know where it went. It went right to all those apps. That's really sad. I'm not saying that having a game on your phone is sinful. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if it distracts you from knowing Jesus better, it needs to go. If you've got time for games on the phone, if you've got time for social media on the phone, but you don't have time for devotions, you have an idol problem. You know that, right? Some of you might have hobbies, things that are special to you. Maybe it's deer hunting. I love to deer hunt. Guys, it's real easy for us, maybe ladies too, to be so consumed by I have to get a deer. Because I'm going to tell you what, when that deer fever hits, I want to be there too. And I have to fight the sin of coveting when all these guys are putting their pictures on Facebook, and I have to go, oh, rejoice with them who do rejoice. Yeah, And, but it's real easy for us, isn't it? To all of a sudden have all this time for deer hunting, and all of a sudden our time for the Lord just somehow shrunk. Folks, if that's what's happening, we're going to have to count that deer hunting as loss. Maybe it's spending time with friends. Maybe young people, it's college prep. Maybe it's some other hobby. Maybe it's some kind of recreation. Maybe it's just reading. Maybe it's watching the news. Look, so many things, not sinful things, but if they distract you from knowing and deepening your relationship with Jesus, they need to go. They got to. If knowing Jesus and developing your relationship with him, if he's number one, then there's some things that are not sinful that are going to have to go. They're going to be different from you than they are from me. They're going to be different for me than they are for you. But folks, you know your life. And friends, if it's keeping us from knowing Jesus better, it needs to go. Because pursuing God changes your perspective. Number two, pursuing a relationship with God changes your priority. Now notice I said your priority. What do I mean by that? Watch it now. In verse 8, he says, Yea, doubtless I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus, my Lord. The word excellency there, he talks about the excellency of the knowledge of Jesus, the excellency of knowing God. The word excellency there is a Greek word that means the best you can get. The very best that you could get. Look, when it comes to buying stuff, when you purchase stuff, there's some things that I purchase that I don't need a high quality on. Like for me, I look at dishes that just everyday dishes that you eat off of. What I want to know what's the cheapest thing Walmart or Dollar General has. Okay. Now, for some of you ladies, you think that's absolutely horrid, and you want to have you want to have some kind of special maybe an antique set. Maybe that's very important. You think we should have the best quality of dishes, and just two different perspectives. Now me, boy, when it comes especially to my truck and my trailer, because I travel so much, I want the best tires that I can get. When it comes to my truck and trailer, I don't buy the cheapest tire. Absolutely not. I'll buy the cheapest dinner plate. But when it comes to tires, I want a good one. And why? Because it's something that's very important. And what God says is, and when he says the excellency, he says, excellency means the best that you can possibly get, the best brand that you could possibly buy. And here's what he's saying. He's saying the best thing that you could ever have, the greatest, most superior thing you'll ever get is a relationship with Jesus that actually deepens. A lot of you in this room are married or were married at least at some point, and marriage starts a relationship, right? Starts a very close relationship. So does salvation. When you got saved, you started a relationship with Jesus. Folks, everyone in this room knows marriages don't do well if you don't work on deepening it. If you don't work on developing it, if you don't work on spending time together, it's not going to go well. It's amazing how as time goes on, sometimes two spouses kind of grow apart. Sometimes it's because they're so distracted by not necessarily sinful things, but just their own things. And they kind of grow apart and do their own thing until they're kind of almost living separate lives. And we know that's not healthy for a marriage. Then why do we do it in our relationship with Jesus? Because a relationship with Jesus isn't just, well, I got saved on this date, but it means from now to the day that I die, I'm working on developing it. I'm working on deepening it. I want to know Jesus better. I want to please him better. I want to just enjoy him more. I don't want to be just a surface knowing Jesus. I want to know him inside and out, from the top to the bottom. I want to know him because knowing God, it's called an excellency, the best you can get. Knowing God deeper is better than any career. It's better than any education. It's better than any job. It's better than any money. It's better than any sport. It's better than any hobby that you could possibly come to. Why? Because Jesus should be our priority. Now, there's a reason why I said pursuing God changes your priority. Did you know? Okay, got this from a secular author. He said the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. Did you know that for 500 years in the English language, they never said the word priorities? Priority was singular, and they never put a plural on it until the 1900s. And in the 1900s, what happened? Oh, we got a lot to do. We got a lot of things going on. Technology is developing. We got a lot of irons in the fire now. We have communication. Now we have transportation. It's all upgraded, so we can have a lot of irons in the fire. So now we don't just have one priority. We have priorities. And this secular, unsaved author noted and said, that may be one of the worst things we did as a society, as an English-speaking society, is we changed priority into priorities. The idea is that, we can have multiple things that are number one. Hey, listen. I don't know if you've ever worked for a company where they had multiple things that were number one. It's impossible to work for them. Well, maybe not impossible, but it's hard. When I worked delis inside grocery stores, and this one deli that I worked in Wisconsin, you knew they had a priority. You know what it was? Take care of the customers. Literally, you could work an 8-hour shift, and if you didn't get a single thing done on the list that the manager had, but you waited on customers nonstop with all the speed and all the accuracy and all the friendliness that you could possibly muster up, you were applauded as one of the best workers. even if you got nothing on the list done. Man, I went then and I worked for, I also worked at delis for Publix. And I'll tell you what, they would tell you number one priority was customers, but I'm just going to tell you what, they had multiple priorities. You know, oh, well, I worked in a deli. You know, well, the food's going out of time. You know, the time's about to expire. And at least the one where I was at, you know, well, that's your number one priority. Or sometimes, you know, the slicers for the meats, you had to clean those every so many hours. And so once that happened, they said, oh, no, that becomes your priority because, you know, if the health department walks in, they could give us a fine if we haven't cleaned it. And you know, there was also his personal list of things to get done. So that was also kind of a priority. And so all of a sudden, you have all these priorities. And guess what? Whichever one you picked to do, you did the wrong one. Anyone ever worked like that, to be at a spot where you had to work like that before, where your manager didn't actually have one priority? I'll tell you, in Wisconsin, it was real easy to work there. You know why? Because we knew what was number one. Everybody knew it, and nobody could mess it up. And folks, God says, you want to deepen your walk with God, you got to have a priority. And he says it's got to be me. Hobbies are good. Jobs are good. Careers are good. Education is good. Family is good, but it's not priority. Jesus is. I'm just going to tell you, if we try to put one of those things, number one, we're going to have issues. Because you know, there's a philosophy out there, and I'm going to tell you, Christian, it actually is worldly. The philosophy is family is everything. Friend, listen very carefully. If you're a Christian, family is not everything. God is everything. Because if you have that flip-flopped, you have an idol in your life. Now, I'll tell you what, if you've got God as number one, family's going to come right in where it's supposed to at number two. But if you prioritize family over God, you're going to have issues in your family. God says, look, someone's got to be number one. You can only have one number one. And he says, I'm supposed to be it. And by the way, that's not arrogant of God to say. I mean, he bought our souls from hell. He has every right to say that I'm your number one, that I am your priority. And so what Paul says, he says in verse 8, he says, for whom I suffered the loss of all things. In other words, he said, I don't care what I had to lose to deepen my relationship with Jesus, I'm going to do it. Hey, listen, if having a deeper relationship with Jesus cost you a boyfriend or a girlfriend, would you be willing to lose it? If deepening your walk with God meant you lost a job or a career, would you dump it? If deepening your walk with God was going to cost you closeness with extended family, would you leave it? If deepening your walk with God cost you time, cost you money, cost you a TV show, if it cost you a set of friends, would you prioritize Jesus over everything? Would you really? Some of you would not, maybe. Because you have other things you love, maybe more than the Lord, or on the same level as the Lord. Listen, Jesus doesn't want to be on the same level as everyone else. He wants to be number one. You want to deepen your walk with God? He says, look, I'm not saying that you have to get rid of everything, but Paul said, I'm willing to. If it kept Paul from knowing Jesus better, he said, I'm willing to dump it. Why? Because pursuing a relationship with God changes what you view as your priority. Perspective, priority, and finally, number 3, pursuing God changes what you view is pointless. In verse number 8, he says, I suffered the loss of all things. And notice what he says. Anything that distracts him from knowing Jesus better, he says, I do count them but dung. You know what he calls it? Something that distracts him from knowing Jesus better? He calls it dung. Folks, I read a lot of commentaries and such and help with studying. It's really funny when you get to a word like that. And these Bible scholars that sometimes I feel like they never picked up a shovel in their lives, and they're writing about things, they just get all awkward around a word like that. Like I feel like they've never been outside of an office, you know what I'm saying? And I read several commentators, and they bounced, and they had this like long paragraph about the word dung and bounced all around it, saying, well, in some places it's used to refer to garbage scraps and refer to rubbish and refer to refuse and all kinds of other little things. And it was almost at the end, they felt embarrassed to say, and it could also refer to excrement. Folks, the word dung, sorry, I have kids. The word dung refers to poop. Okay? It does. I don't know, maybe you never heard that word in a sermon before, but that is actually a very biblical word, the word poop. Why, you say, why is that? And look, I'm going to tell you what. I'm a dad. I can't stand dirty diapers. Can't stand it. It's just, I can't stand it. Listen, I have changed diapers, so ladies, don't come to me like, you need to help with that. Yes, I do, okay? I do help with dirty diapers. I've done way more than I ever want to, okay? And it's great. We're down to our one final child is still in diapers, and we're almost there, okay? Can I tell you something? I want poop, dung, the Bible word. I want dung as far away from me as I can get it. In fact, when I change a diaper, you know what happens? It goes in a bag and it goes out the door. If our trailer was here, one of the things about that, if our trailer's ever here and you see a bag sitting outside our trailer door, don't touch it. It's toxic. Okay, that's just okay. You don't want to go near it. Okay, because I want that thing to be out of my life. I want it far away. And so what is he saying? Paul says, I want you to know what I think of anything that distracts me from knowing Jesus better. He says, I consider it to be dung. That's strong language. Yeah. You know why he uses strong language? Because some of you just will not give up things to know Jesus better. Some of you have already insisted you would not change some of you in this room, you've already said, you will not, even though maybe your career is pulling you away from knowing the Lord, you've already said, I'm going to finish my career. I don't care what it costs in my relationship with Jesus. And Paul says, yeah, I had a bigger career than you, and I considered it dung because Jesus is better. He said, I switched my careers from wealthy Phariseeism to tent making. Why? Because I wanted to know Jesus better. So I gave up things. Boy, you know the missionaries, the heroes we talk about, like Adoniram Judson, when we talk about William Carey, we talk about Hudson Taylor, these people had skills they gave up because they wanted to know Jesus better and make him known. Why? Because that was priority. It was most important thing. And listen, I'm not saying that if you have something nice in your life, you got to get rid of it. I'm not saying that at all. Friend, you know in your life what things you have that are not necessarily sinful in of themselves, but they're distracting you from knowing Jesus better. They need to go. So what about you? Are you actually willing to discard anything that's keeping you from following, serving, obeying Jesus better? What's keeping you from knowing him better? What's keeping you from serving him better? What's keeping you from pleasing and obeying him better? Look, I'm not inside your life. I don't know how how you stack things up in your life. I'm just telling you. If something distracts you from knowing Jesus better, get rid of it. Even if it's not a sinful thing. Why is it such a big deal? I'm just telling you, when Paul chose to make this his lifestyle, there's a reason why Paul saw so many people saved and we do not. Because when he actually said, I'll give up anything it costs to know Jesus better, God used him. You want to be used by God? You're going to have to give up some things. Look, I can't come to your life and make the list. But the Holy Spirit of God may be giving you your list right now. And so you better pick. You better pick if you're going to choose to count some things as lost tonight. So let's bow our heads and let's close our eyes.